Hello, and welcome to a Bon Mott's production of
MOTSterpiece Theater,
where we review critically acclaimed cinema spanning the breadth of human filmmaking.
MOTSterpiece Theater,
Spoilers, mature content, inappropriate language. Join us.
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Good evening, and welcome to another MOTSterpiece Theater. Tonight we are doing number 43 on the AFI 100 list, Midnight Cowboy. I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, here with Scott Thurlow.
Yeehaw!
And Stephen Hermosi.
Hello.
Scott, you have a funny logline as per tradition.
Yes, I came up with and I think agreed that we can say this is a requiem for a cowboy, as a reference to a later movie that shares similar themes and so forth, as we'll talk about, but that's what I came up with.
This is absolutely a depressing movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give the overall synopsis. Pimpin' ain't easy, but it's necessary. So
Damn right.
Jon Voight is a cowboy from Texas who travels to New York to become a Deuce Bigelow male gigolo.
Yeah.
And realizes that all of his fantasies are that everything's going to fail miserably on him, and he slowly gets broken by New York.
Mm-hmm.
So, Steven, would you like to begin with the introduction?
Sure. So it kind of opens up with Jon Voight's character, Joe Buck,
Yep.
in his home, I guess it's his hometown in Texas. He's getting himself ready, putting on his cowboy duds. Meanwhile, everybody's looking for him. Ends up he's going to New York. So he hits the road, says goodbye to all his friends, hits the road, takes a bus to New York, meets some colorful characters on the bus, eventually gets into town, kind of this wide-eyed, southern boy, and immediately starts getting his ass kicked by the city. He is trying to become a male prostitute, basically.
It's the hustle.
He's as he says, a hustler.
He's a stud, as espoused by him.
Not a real cowboy, but definitely a stud, yeah. So he tries to hit on a couple women. They don't really, buy it. And then eventually somebody brings him back up to her penthouse and ends up hustling him out of a couple, like $10 or $20. So as he leaves there, I think he goes and gets kicked out of his hotel that he's staying at.
Oh, no, this is
Not yet.
Oh, you're right. He goes to the bar, meets this guy named Rico Rizzo, who everybody calls Ratso.
Played by Dustin Hoffman.
And that's about the point where the intro ends, and I think we said the body begins at about that point.
I like to say that this movie, even though it stars Jon Voight and you follow him throughout as the protagonist, it's all about his relationship with Ratso, as I'm going to call him throughout.
Yep.
Or
Yeah.
Rico Suave, I guess, if you wish.
Ratso Suave.
And basically, Dustin Hoffman's character, Ratso, is the embodiment of New York. And
Yep.
it is who carries him throughout the rest of the movie. And that's why I think it's a good end of the introduction
Right.
there, because it's when that relationship starts to build, which will be the driving force for the rest of the story.
And the relationship immediately starts on Ratso swindling
Yeah.
Joe.
Well, of course, that's the kind of the funny thing.
Yeah.
He's going to New York to be a male hustler, but he gets hustled immediately by the embodiment of New York, i.e. Ratso, sure.
I also like the fact that as he's taking the bus ride, he's friendly with people, and he likes to be that he views himself as this old school kind of personification of being a cowboy.
Right.
And he has like a little very tiny boombox that he carries around with him.
Little radio.
Portable
yeah.
radio.
That is playing like the cowboy songs when he is starting out. And yeah, at first he's in a friendly atmosphere, but as he starts traveling towards New York, it becomes obvious very quickly that he's completely out of his depth.
Yes, exactly.
And how people become less and less friendly. And you have not only him on as the cowboy on the bus, but you have like the sailors and the kind of military men and the salesman type characters. So he's out of his element.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, there's always there's constantly this reminder that he doesn't really fit in anywhere he is. Even in Texas, when he's, packing up, getting ready to leave, everybody's like, everybody's calling out, "Where's Joe Buck?" Because he's supposed to be at work, washing dishes. Apparently he just gets there late all the time. And no matter where he is, it kind of seems like he just has never found his place.
Because he's Joe Buck and he likes to fuck.
Yeah. Maybe, or be a terrible baseball announcer, but that's a whole other story.
That's his alternate path.
Yeah.
For sure.
But maybe, well, we'll discuss the end of the movie and perhaps if he may be finding his place or not at that point. But, yeah, I mean, I thought the intro was great. It explains exactly who he is, what his plans are, and you immediately see through him just interacting and kind of the way that he is on the bus that New York is going to eat him alive.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, that's pretty much what I can say. It's a good setup. Like you said, shows who he is and what his plan is. And as he gets increasingly closer to his destination, like you as the audience know, like this place is going to murder him.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's perfectly well set up and I liked it. It was fine.
It establishes the tone of the movie straight off the bat. And I wouldn't say necessarily the humor of the movie, unless you want to count the humor as something that is very cruel and vicious and very ironic
I do,
in
of
a
course,
way.
but I still think it's there, obviously, yeah.
So, it's a very uncomfortable movie to watch, at least for the first half until he establishes himself. But, yeah, the opening is very uncomfortable to watch as well. So I have to give it full credit for that. It tells you exactly what to expect right off the bat and carry through for the rest. But so I'm going to give it a 1.
Yep, I agree. I'll give it a 1 as well.
Yep, 1 for me too.
All right, Scott, would you like to continue this discussion onto the body of the story?
Sure. So picking up from where he dejectedly goes to the bar and has his last couple of dollars trying to buy beer, and he happens to sit next to Ratso, who notices this, and he's like, it's obvious to Ratso that this is an easy mark. He's an out-of-town cowboy. Oh, cowboy guy, huh?
Yeah.
So they start talking, and he's like, "I'll buy you a drink." And Joe Buck tries to explain to Ratso his plan, like why he came to New York, etc. And Ratso, of course, sees an opportunity to hustle him in turn, and does so. He says, "Oh, I know. Oh, you're trying to be a gigolo, essentially. I know a guy who can help you out." So he sends Joe Buck to see this guy, like an old creepy man in his apartment who has a little bathroom mural of Jesus, which freaks Joe Buck out. So thus burning him. And then there's a couple of flashbacks where, or like interspliced, I guess, flashback / nightmarish scenes, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So Joe Buck starts seeing Ratso appear in his early memories, dreams, etc. And so he's now pissed off and searching for me, and happens to run into Ratso or sees him at a restaurant a couple days later, and goes to confront him about it. And Ratso's like, "Hey man, hey, back off, we're cool. So it's just funny. Like, of course, it's set up originally to have an antagonistic relationship, but they eventually become buddies. Joe Buck runs out of money, so the shitty hotel he's staying in won't let him stay there anymore. They keep all his things so he can pay off his bill. So he's sort of like wandering around New York, and he realizes it's not the easy, like, women aren't going to be coming to him left and right. So he has to go down to the shady side-ish of town and start to prostitute himself to other men at that point. And that's where he starts to realize that this maybe ain't the vacation he thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And not only that, his first attempt with a woman in the introduction, she ends up screwing him out of the money.
Right.
She ends up saying, "How dare you ask me for money for this?" And basically guilt trips him into giving her money.
Right, exactly.
And then he ends up going to the movies with this guy who offers to pay him $25, I think,
or whatever it was, yeah, 20
to blow
25.
him in the theater. The guy to Joe Buck, and the guy in the end is like, "I don't have any money on me."
Yeah.
So he kind of
he's
he's not good at
screwed.
being a male prostitute, either for women or for men.
Yeah, exactly. So then Ratso invites him back to his shithole apartment that he's basically squatting in, condemned apartment, and that's when they start to form their friendship.
Yeah.
And they they start hustling New York together as a partner, kind of like stealing little fruits and stuff from little side stands and pickpocketing people. Like Joe Buck will be the lookout essentially, or distract somebody while Ratso pickpockets him. So there's, it's just them basically living their shitty little life in their crappy apartment, and just trying to scrape by. And Joe Buck's sort of like, you can see, as this goes on, he's getting like he's losing his Southern boy, like, charming exterior and getting hardened by the lifestyle he's been forced to live in. So all that goes on, and they're having, they get a little, they get a couple dollars here and there, and they're having coffee together at a diner, and two Andy Warhol acolytes-ish basically accost them and invite them to a very 1960s, I think this movie was 1969 or 8 or 9, a very Warhol-inspired, like, weird artist party, and they show up there. And that's kind of like right about then. So Joe Buck gets high, first time in his life, and he's kind of just wandering around. He finally does, he pitches, or Ratso acts as his pimp kind of, and pitches Joe Buck to a mink fur coat wearing woman at the party. And she's basically like, sure, I'll try it, like whatever. Like,
he finally gets one in the win column.
Exactly. So Joe Buck goes back to that woman's apartment, and Ratso is sort of literally left out in the cold. Although in the hopes that Joe Buck will actually get the money this time from the woman. So there's a whole scene about that. And then afterwards, he does in fact. So he goes back to like celebrate with Ratso and sees that Ratso is in a pretty bad spot, not looking well health-wise. And I believe that's where we agreed. That's about where the body ends.
Yeah.
There's a scene I want to discuss in there,
All
which where basically they go to an escort service. And Rizzo ends up pickpocketing the guy for the information.
Right.
And sends Joe Buck instead to go and be the escort for this. And I love the scene because this movie is told through like disjointed kind of both fantasy and flashback.
Right, yeah.
And this one you're seeing, I think it's the only time you actually see the world through Ratso's point of view.
Mm.
And
it's one of the very few times at least.
And you see his fantasy about like this mythical place called Florida, where it's warm all the time, and the women there are old and can be taken advantage of. And he has his leg is hurt. He's a cripple, and here in his fantasies he can run again. He has Joe by his side, who's playing like he's the brains and Joe's the brawn.
Yeah, exactly.
And like he's living a wonderful life. And oddly enough, you can see the little like he cooks over this little stove in the apartment, like with like
they're shitty
little
like,
things
cans,
they've stolen. And here he's at this buffet, but he's cooking up the same type of meal on this buffet table. So it was actually a very endearing scene, and it really sold the character to me, seeing what his desires are and how they're realistic and totally fantasy at the same time.
Yeah, I mean that's what Ratso's fantasies would be, but it makes sense to the character for sure. That's good. It's a good point to point out that scene, but overall, like it all, I think it gave you what you needed to know, like as their arc together. I guess I want to say. So I mean, this movie is like 2 hours, like slightly under 2 hours. So I don't want to say it felt long, but it's like some of it was like, okay, you've done this before. Like I've seen what you're trying to do with the characters. I get it, and so it's kind of just more of it. But overall, like not to say it was bad, just
I totally disagree.
Yeah,
I thought the entire movie flowed seamlessly.
I wouldn't say.
Maybe a couple of the scenes didn't hit their mark.
Maybe that's.
But
what
I never
say.
thought that there was anything redundant.
All right.
Necessarily.
I think you did rephrase it the way what I meant was like not all of it worked, but a lot of it did work, and it worked well. So I guess that's all. My little nitpick about it is all.
I didn't have much. I didn't have many nitpicks about this movie. I think it all worked pretty well. Actually, right in the beginning, when it became really obvious that they were going to keep using the same, like the opening song that they used over and over and over again, I was like, this is going to get old, but it didn't actually get old.
No, you're right about that. Like, I didn't feel that was the case in terms of that little angle, sure.
But overall, I thought that it did a really good job of pacing. They went to enough, I guess, they were in enough different situations that it didn't really, feel like it was bogging down at any point. And I think that all of the scenes had their point and had their place within the narrative.
No, I mostly agree. Sure. So yeah, I'm going to give it a 1 overall.
To the point of realism about this, It's a little personal to me. I did some time once upon a time, and the characters you see in this, and specifically like Ratso's kind of hustles, and just these little tiny bits of having half cigarettes and having to cook a terrible meal, very rang true to me.
Sure. For
how like this lifestyle would actually be, and the fact that you look at someone and like this guy who comes in with. You see people as marks, and you see their entire. I don't know. It just struck me as very real.
Sure, I get it.
And that is something I don't often, even with movies who attempt to be real, like this actually rang very true to me about how that world exists.
Sure. Yeah, fair enough. It's all solid. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I'll give it a 1 overall.
Cool. Yeah,
I only have a very few little bit of nitpicks, and that completely outweighed by the quality of the rest of it. So
I'm going to agree. I'm guessing you're giving it a 1 as well, Ian.
Yes. So I'm going to go on to conclusion now. So we left off with after this kind of party, and one thing is that not only does Joe Buck actually succeed in his quest to become a gigolo, but he's actually got a referral. So he's about to achieve his New York dream, I suppose, of sleeping with women for money. But when he comes back, he finds that Ratso is sick and dying, and he's been kind of sick throughout the entire movie. It's getting worse. He's feverish.
Right.
So
by the way, Dustin Hoffman has a sheen of sweat on him throughout this entire movie.
Yeah.
It's a little bit. I mean, I know it's supposed to be, but it's a little bit gross to look at him.
I'm just saying, like, his hair's all greasy and shit too. But sure, but as you were saying, it's realistic. I guess I want to say about
which is actually, I think you pointed this out while we're watching it. Dustin Hoffman looks more raggedy than Joe Buck does.
Yeah.
So it kind of has this. If there's a point where it drew me out, it's the fact that Dustin Hoffman looks like he belongs in this world, and Joe Buck never actually does look that.
Sure.
Yeah.
But regardless, so Joe Buck's a nice guy overall. He wants to look out for his friend who is now dying. So he decides to go out and prostitute himself once again for the money to take Ratso down to Florida, which is, again, the promised land that we all hope to get to one day.
Right. That's where I hope to die.
Right.
And he ends up getting picked up by a rather wealthy individual, a male who I thought did a very good job of being kind of both a creeper and an innocent person at the same time.
Sure, he was sort of torn about his sexuality, and that was clear to sure.
And basically, Joe Buck ends up mugging him for the money, though it doesn't come off as necessarily like it's sort of an impulsive decision.
Yeah, it wasn't like necessarily premeditated, but it sort of devolved into that situation.
Yeah.
He needed the money. The guy had the money. The guy was offering him $10.
Just not enough to get them down to Florida.
To just leave the apartment because he decided not to go through with the whole thing. And I don't know if he kills him or not.
It's ambiguous for sure.
Yeah, it's very ambiguous.
I got that he did, but you're right. Like it's not 100% spelled out for you.
There's a point. Well, you don't really know. He just kind of shoves the phone in his mouth, and then
it cuts away. Yeah, sure.
Ratso asks him if he killed the guy, or he goes, "I hope you didn't kill that guy." And he goes, "There's blood on your jacket," and he doesn't answer him.
Oh, he says, "I don't want to talk about it."
Yeah.
So that's all you get.
Could go either way.
Right.
I'm going to lean towards because Joe Buck does have a kind of vengeful streak to him.
Yeah.
And I could see him in the heat of the moment doing something incredibly
he does
violent.
say, just real quickly, he does say earlier when he confronts Ratso before they started to become buddies, he said, if I'd found you that day that you burned me, I would have fucking killed you.
The entire time that he's looking for him, he's having visions of strangling Ratso.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I'm just saying.
I don't know. I just don't every time he is about to do something violent in this movie, he thinks better of it.
Right.
I feel like I feel like he has moments where his emotions take a hold of him, but he always gets a handle on it.
You never see him in that moment. You see him pursuing that moment, chasing down people.
There's a moment where he picks up the beer bottle and he's about to throw it at somebody. I forget even who he's going to throw it at.
The bartender.
Yeah, but then he thinks better of it and puts it back down.
Sure.
He seems like the kind of guy who just immediately realizes what he's going to do and gets a handle over his emotions pretty quickly.
But I'd like to make this point. That's true early in the movie, but as he's more beaten down by New York, I think I'd get out of that he's doing more desperate measures. So that's my argument for that.
I can see that, but I don't know if there's any real...
I mean, it might not matter in the end whether or not
Yeah.
he kills the guy or not, but go on.
So he ends up taking the money, and they take their bus ride to, again, the mythical Nirvana.
The promised
that
land of
is,
Miami.
Florida.
The Fountain of Youth.
Sure.
And he ends up changing his clothes. He gets rid of his cowboy getup, so he's no longer the midnight cowboy. Now he's the midnight, I don't know.
Golf course attendee.
Just
parrot head, I suppose.
yeah, sure. All right. That's a good one.
Yeah.
And Ratso unfortunately succumbs to a sickness on the bus ride, and which has the most chill bus driver in the world who's like, yeah, I drive a bus to Miami. I see dead old people all the time. That's implied, but so
well, that's what we made that joke of.
Yeah.
but-
and then supposedly Joe Buck leaves behind his Texas roots, leaves behind his New York roots, and becomes a Floridian.
In theory, I guess. But
But that's he's at least achieved the next step
all right.
in his.
Sure.
And again, now I like to discuss more of like narrative closure when it comes to the ending.
Yeah.
And this really does finish out the plot line of Joe Buck traveling to New York, getting broken by it, and then having to leave everything behind. Leave behind the fantasies of what he wanted to be
Right.
to
True.
pursue a dishwashing job in Miami, which is the destination all New Yorkers eventually end up.
Yeah.
It's full cycle, sure.
Well, I mean, that's all you can do when you get kicked out of the mob and have to go to
All right.
Miami. But yeah, I mean, it definitely all comes around, and you kind of get like the end that you're expecting the entire movie with Ratso, where he's like sick the entire time. It kind of leaves Joe's story wide open. You don't know what he's going to do, where he's going to go from there, but he doesn't want to be a hustler anymore. He's talking about, actually,
He does say he's going to get a job of some sorts.
yeah, he's telling dead Ratso before he realizes that he's dead, sitting right next to him, that, by the way, he's really selfish. He didn't even notice that the guy was dead while he's talking to him about all his hopes and
I've
dreams.
talked to dead people.
he was
Long
excited.
before I
No, he was
noticed
excited. He was
that.
like, "Hey, Ratso, you and I are gonna go." Oh, like
Oh boy.
Sure.
No, if it was that, it
No.
would be fine. But he talked to him for like good 2 minutes
Hey,
before he realized
Ratso,
he
I
was
haven't
dead.
heard you cough in like
Yeah.
5 minutes. Are you okay?
yeah, sure.
By the way, it's sort of the opposite of Chekhov's gun here, because what I'm going to call Chekhov's cough, because you hear this cough throughout the entire thing, and you're just waiting for him to die. You know it's going to happen. This is the first time I'm actually watching the movie, and there's no way Ratso's getting out of this alive.
Sure.
If there's a cough introduced in the first scene, and then also in every other scene,
That's why I said to
you
you,
better
like,
believe somebody's going to die.
that's funny, but it's not that quite Chekhov's because it was happening the whole movie. But
Yeah.
but that also means like it's obvious that that's going to be his fate.
Right.
So anyway, I mean, like you guys are right. Like I agree with most of that. It was all it did have the closure it needed to have. So I'm definitely going to give it a 1.
Yeah, I'll give it a 1 as well. It closed.
I will give it a 1 as well. I think the movie overall was a solid work, and really told a very. I mean, we're laughing about it, but this is a very
Sure,
depressing.
no, it's
movie
not an
overall.
upbeat movie, but that's sort of like me
Yeah.
personally. I kind of like that stuff.
You
so,
have to laugh to keep from crying.
I guess.
So speaking of laughing and crying, Steve-O, it's on to you for themes.
Themes. Well, as we were just mentioning, this film is all about how depressing life is,
Mhm.
kind of, and how despite your best intentions, it will just beat the shit out of you, especially if you're in a city, I guess. Or
Greatest city in the world, man.
yeah, or especially if you're in New York. It's kind of the taking a look at the other side of New York, not the glamorous New York City that a lot of if you watch a lot of movies, you'll see that side, but
Well, not the idealized version that
If
Joe Buck
you-
had in his head.
right, exactly. That's where it seems like he got the idea of New York from like Frank Sinatra and like just movies that glamorize New York.
Or Jay-Z.
Whereas movies like Midnight Cowboy and Taxi Driver and those types of things really show the underbelly of the city really well.
Sure.
And I think that was a big theme in this film, was kind of showing a city for what it really is and how it actually affects the people of it. And I think another part of that is kind of the idea of how low do you go and what do you do to survive when you hit, a certain low point, or when you hit rock bottom. When do you know that you've hit rock bottom, and what do you do to keep going at that point?
So I see your call and raise you the emasculation of cowboys. All right, so
but he's not a real cowboy. He keeps saying it.
But hold on. Hollywood was founded upon cowboy movies. That's fact.
Yeah,
and
sure. Okay.
That's why it's in Hollywood, not New York. Or that's why the movie industry is in Hollywood, not New York, because of westerns.
Yes.
Another interesting thing.
Yeah. No,
look it up.
I think this movie really speaks to that, because initially, right in the beginning, he's listening to the radio about what New York women want. I think one of them is Gary Cooper, and they kind of reference like John. He references
they do drop
Wayne
in a lot of things like that. You're right.
So Hollywood was built upon the idea of this hyper masculine cowboy, and this was a period when like Hollywood was moving away from that. So here you have a character who is not a real cowboy, because Hollywood never dealt with real cowboys. Right. Hollywood dealt with a fantasy version of it. Right. And he lives a fantasy version of cowboys, which always get the woman in the end, which are like rugged, masculine, strong jaw, which is John Voight plays very, very well. Except their joke that, the only one into cowboys nowadays in New York would be like the homosexual crowd.
Right.
And he's constantly rejected of his masculine view of what like creates the fantasy cowboy. In fact, to the point when he eventually has to reject that in order to achieve happiness. And it is really counters a lot of those like kind of masculine ideas you have. He's poor male, and both characters male, striving not to make themselves in the world, but to basically mooch off of rich women.
Yeah.
Because that's what all women want. All women want is a good lay. I think they make a reference earlier to like biggest wiener in Texas type thing. Sure. It actually shows
there
signs.
is
biggest hot dog in Texas. Yeah. Sure.
So, yeah, and he's constantly has that destroyed. He can't even, in a sense, in a world which would say like, homosexuals, like, in that kind of idea, like that they're deviant in that kind of movie sense. He can't even succeed in that. It is a tear down of masculinity, and it is like I was watching it. I was fascinated by it because it is truly the biggest blow to that. And a lot of the movies we actually watched from the AFI list, whether we're dealing with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, movies like that really deal. Or Unforgiven, I believe, is also on the list, which deals with that cowboys weren't the fantasy you had of them. Right. And I think this is a natural kind of the modern day equivalent of that. And I think it's really kind of like stab in the heart to those who believe in the masculine ideals.
Well, that's very interesting, and not that I disagree with it, but I'll one-up you if I possibly can, okay. Where it's just, you're right, like, you convinced me that it does have that aspect, absolutely, and I think that it did address that, but also, like, as a greater theme is basically the death of your dreams, whoever you may be, but filtered through this kind of story, like, you're wide-eyed and saying, like, I'm gonna go out and I'm the best, I know I'm good, I can make it, and no, life was just gonna beat you down. So, I mean, of course, maybe me being me, that's what I got out of it, but I think it's still there as a theme overall, just again, like, maybe, like, filtered through the facet, as you were saying.
I just had an idea of something as well. I'm gonna talk this out right now and see how it works.
Sure.
I think another theme is the idea that you can't just be yourself and survive or, like, win. Like, he doesn't actually start doing well until he kind of fits himself into the pegs that's, into the holes that society has made for him,
Sure, no, that's a good point.
All right, so there's actually another theme I would like to discuss, and I think you can't escape your past here either. So not only do you have to, like you were saying, conform to how society wants you, but Rico is always stuck as Ratso.
Yeah, true.
He can't escape that. In fact, when you get to Florida, you can't call me Ratso, just Rico. And you see John Voight's character screw that up.
Yeah,
like it's so ingrained in who he is. And then you have John Voight's character,
Joe Buck.
Joe Buck, constantly haunted by these kind of very ambiguous scenes from his past, which deal with his grandmother.
But traumatic ones, though.
Yeah.
To be clear.
But it's very much influenced who he is. His grandmother was like, oh, you're going to dress up like a cowboy. You're going to be the handsomest cowboy. And he still wears a cowboy uniform to today. Something that happened with his girlfriend. We actually tried looking it up, but there's papers written about it.
Yeah,
it's ambiguous enough,
obvious.
But we could say something bad and traumatic.
So, yeah, I mean, it's, it's pretty clear that she was raped and I don't think murdered, but
institutionalized.
His girlfriend at the time, or so Annie was raped.
His love, yeah.
Right. But it doesn't really say what happened to her afterwards. But it's just kind of strange. So that happens, I guess. Well, something happens. They're not together anymore. He leaves town, and she's just kind of a memory in this story. She doesn't make an appearance or anything, but it's clearly super traumatic for him, and he's continuously trying to run from it throughout the movie, which he doesn't do very well.
Yeah, I think that all that's valid. It all is legit, and it all ties in. So this movie has a number of themes, or maybe a couple of major themes, addressing them on multiple levels.
Yes,
I guess I want to say so.
A very clever film.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm definitely giving it a 1 as well.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, Scott, it's on to you for antagonist.
All right. Well, it sort of ties into, as we were all saying, it's going to be life, I guess, society. Again, I know that I say this a lot, but I think it's clearer than most other things we might have talked about in this light. That, you can have the most optimistic plan and outlook that you want, but life often doesn't conform to that. So you're going to have to adapt, and you might, find yourself doing things you never thought you would do or want to do, but nevertheless, to survive, you must. So, and I think maybe a sub thing is possibly of course they set up Ratso to be as you were saying, the embodiment of New York, but that sort of then ties into what I was just saying. So of course he's not an antagonist, the people of New York, again,
right,
what you have to do, what you're confronted with versus what your sort of naive worldview might have been. So I think that's, clear to me.
Steve-O, you have on multiple occasions bemoaned our system for instance, if there's not a clear antagonist, we have to give it a 0. It's not fair to give this a lower score because the antagonist isn't strong. And I can make as many wild gestures at antagonists. I can say that Joe Buck is the protagonist and Ratso theoretically is his antagonist because he's what keeps Joe Buck in this world. And in fact, the death of Ratso is what frees Joe Buck from the lifestyle that he's in. And in a sense, they're friends, but they're dragging themselves down. But I don't know if that's that's an attempt to, I think, stretch too much the definition. He doesn't life, but is that a good there's no clear-cut antagonist here. And
it is to me, of course, but I see your point.
I think that's interesting about Ratso, but I don't think that Ratso is an antagonist. While there's no personification of an antagonist in this, Joe feels antaganized the entire time.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way I can put it. I was actually thinking about giving this a 0 for that very reason that you said, but I don't think I can and be honest about, how I want to score this film because he is constantly struggling against whatever situation he's in.
The chaos of life, I guess I want to say that.
Yeah, maybe the city is the antagonist, but whatever it is, the city, life, circumstance, whatever it is beating the shit out of him the entire movie, and you feel it. You definitely feel that, and I couldn't in good conscience give antagonist a 0 on this film.
I agree with
for that very reason.
I would have said that anyways, but it's nice that you're agreeing with me for once, at least on that front. So I think we're all giving it a 1.
And now I'm on the protagonist. So I suppose if you don't want to count Ratso as a antagonist, which I think there's an argument to be made, but
I think he's more of a protagonist.
Here's the thing:
or becomes one.
I think that the most seditious antagonist you can have is the one you feel friendship to, the one that is actually detrimental to your life, but you feel so kindly towards that you can't, you can't view him as antagonist. And I think that is an interesting case. So I'll let someone else discuss Ratso here because I'm more. I don't want to see because he's. I'll let someone else discuss it.
All right.
So I'm going to discuss Joe Buck here, who's the obvious Bane protagonist here. You follow him from the beginning to the end. He is a stupid individual. I mean,
he's somewhat ignorant, I guess. Naive, I guess.
Never been a smart man.
Yes. Nor has ever been a cowboy.
Yeah.
Go on.
But he's not the smartest, or not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Sure.
Yeah.
And he's very naive and very fantastical about life. Again, he's one of those like, all shucks, good old boys who like everything's going to work out if I have a positive idea. And he's eaten alive, as we've mentioned.
Which is really strange knowing some of John Voight's like later work too. Seeing him.
Sure, but this one
now
plays
you
on
know
that.
how he got so cynical.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't know. John Voight does a fantastic job portraying a character who is incredibly believable in the situation, who you constantly makes bad decisions, but you constantly sympathize with decisions he makes. You understand why he makes them, and how he exists justifying his life constantly. He is immediately willing to go to male prostitution just because he needs to survive, but you also feel it's a struggle the entire time. It happens very quickly, and but you see that you mentioned earlier, you see his constant, like, the pressure on him and the idea that he has to keep up appearances. It's a fantastic work. So
he feels like an Atlas character or something. You know, he's got the weight of the world on him the entire movie. It's brutal. But since you left Ratso, I'm going to say that I think he's a protagonist.
I agree with it as well.
First of all, Dustin Hoffman does a great job in this movie as well. Him and John Voight combined to, it's in the top 40 movies or whatever, top 50 movies, so it's clearly a really good one. I think that Dustin Hoffman as Ratso does an amazing job of making you feel for this guy who's just a swindler. You know, the first time you meet him, he completely screws Joe over and sends him to this priest, takes $20 from him, and leaves. And when you find him again, you kind of realize that he's just trying to survive, same as he's in the same boat that Joe is in. They have this really rocky friendship at first, but it's believable. They have great chemistry together, and you learn to really like Ratso as a character.
No, I agree with all that. And yeah, so like I said, you mentioned E earlier that it sort of felt Butch and Cassidy-ish in a similar vein. And yeah, Ratso quickly becomes, I think, a secondary, a protagonist, his buddy, his partner, essentially. And yeah, you learn to grow to have sympathy for him, and can understand his plight as well, and how they are now working together to again survive.
Again, I'll reiterate this one point that I think Joe Buck would have gone back to Texas if
without
he
Ratso.
Had never met Ratso.
That's probably true.
Perhaps,
I mean, I can agree with that.
And
maybe he should have.
And
maybe
he should have. But I think that overall, these are two iconic characters. You'll see them referenced in works to this day. I think you mentioned earlier that Futurama had a reference to this, which again, so you have to give it a 1 just for the sheer iconography that they have established with these two.
No, I'll agree with that, and I will in fact give it a 1.
Yep, I will give it a 1 as well.
Okay, Steve-O, it's on to you with supporting characters.
Supporting characters. I don't know if this is going to be a popular opinion, but I wasn't all that impressed with the supporting characters. They were fine. They did their job, but they were just there. They were kind of window dressing. This movie was all about
right. It's about
Ratso
sure.
and Joe, and like it was kind of a revolving door of people that I didn't really give a damn about. You know, like I guess probably my favorite supporting characters were the two weirdos with the camera.
Sure.
Or at least
Warholians.
the funny, yeah, the Warhol, whatever, neophytes. I was gonna say, but
Good enough.
yeah, I mean the women that he tries to sleep with, I don't really care about any of them. They all do a fine job acting, but it's not like there's no meat to their characters. I don't know. Like, can you guys think?
I'm
of
going to
anything?
give a damning point to your point.
Okay.
I was initially going to say that New York was
I
a
knew you were
great
going to fucking
supporting
say that. 'Cause
character,
I was going to say that too, but
but I don't think it's a great supporting character because this could have been Chicago, this could have been L.A. The focus is so strong on Ratso and Joe Buck that it didn't matter what city they were in. It could have been any
that's a
city
good point.
there.
Yeah, you're true. I agree with that.
And they didn't.
But here's the other thing. I think New York is an antagonist, if anything.
Yeah, but
Well, I was
but even the idea of like the city, it could have been anyone, and I don't think
Right.
that's a. I've seen movies that have done New York better, and I think Taxi Driver did New York as dirty and more meaningfully than this movie did.
Yeah.
So like the priest at the beginning was a pretty good supporting
It's
character.
amusing,
Yeah.
but you're right. I think not enough or something.
So
yeah.
I'm going to give it a 0.
I think I might agree with you. I think like
I'm gonna also go 0.
I was somewhat leaning to that anyways going into it, but I think you made a good point there, Steve-O, and I will give it a 0. There wasn't enough there, I guess I want to say at the end of the day.
All right, Scott, dialogue.
Now this one's kind of tough for me as well. It was good. Like certainly as you said, John Voight and Dustin Hoffman did a great job.
Mhm.
And it was all right. I guess I'll talk it through. It was realistic and believable.
Right.
So I'll give it a lot of credit on that front for sure. I believe that these characters would have, had the interactions they did have. So, like, was there anything? I guess, all right, yeah, the famous thing, as you're saying, the walk in here thing. Like,
I'm walking here.
we all knew about that, or that's a thing you would have known about even if you hadn't seen this movie originally, because it's so like referenced and widespread. But that's just like sort of a one-off little like comedy line thing.
May I give you a counter to that? Though?
Sure.
The body language is fantastic in this.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But even
That's
like,
more style, maybe not dialogue.
No,
but I
because
get
it's their body language speaks volumes with the characters.
All right.
For instance, where Dustin Hoffman pickpockets the guy and then lights a match on the
right off
taxi.
the glass. Yeah, that was good. You're right about that.
And
There's little
him-
mannerisms. Sure.
The mannerisms there, I think, really build the characters so more than their dialogue does.
All right.
And that gives me that
So you count that as dialogue?
because it's expression.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah, no, I see what you mean
But
completely.
I mean, it's not. It's.
I do see
So
your
I don't
point
know.
on that.
Do we count all vocalization as dialogue, even before getting to the body language part? Is all vocalization dialogue?
Yeah, at least I would think so.
except for
a lot of it.
soundtrack.
So
Yeah.
well, I mean, I think we've talked about this before. So any like monologue is counted as dialogue.
Yes, of course.
Now, is any like loud if you
Yeah,
fall to your knees and scream at the sky, is that count as dialogue?
Yes.
If you give a big
Okay.
no, that's still dialogue. Yes. I mean,
All right. I
you're
mean,
right.
it's all a matter of. Sorry, this is a tangent. We should probably talk about this outside of the show, but I'm just trying to put it
No, I
together.
get it.
I feel like
I will say that Joe Buck's radio
mhm.
counts as a dialogue for him because it is how he identifies. It's often, especially at the beginning of the movie, it's how he.
It's almost like a safety blanket
expresses-
for
yeah.
him, kind of.
Yeah.
and that expresses something about who he is, and him having to sell it eventually.
But I mean,
is
that
a
said, if
death to part of his character.
you say that, do you say the same thing about his cowboy boots and his hat? Do you think
No.
those are part of dialogue? That's an expression of himself.
Kind of. Yes, no, you're right. Like you fall down a rabbit hole, but
You
I
know,
guess
it all depends on where you want to cut it off. I mean, it's
So, like, because if a character hummed a certain song, I would count that as a
it's a
expression of
motif,
dialogue.
essentially. Yeah.
right, but the radio is not him creating thoughts. Even, you know what I mean? It's something that's
Yes, I do.
parroting whatever is being said hundreds of miles away to
Aren't
him.
we all parroting what
Or-
we've heard from?
Probably a
Yes.
couple miles away.
We are definitely doing that. But I'll try to rein it in. I guess since specific, there's no piece of dialogue, however you want to qualify dialogue, in my mind, there was nothing that approached something I disliked. Maybe it was like sort of middle of the road at times, but a lot of it, as you were saying, I think you convinced me, at least in the front, that their nonverbal expressions could count, whether or not the clothes or whatever, Steve-O, they do it or not.
Right.
So I think overall, yeah, again, because they were so believable, I think that's where I'm giving the most credit. And at the end of the day, if not like maybe a soft one, but not like a middling one, but still one.
I'm going to give it a strong one. I think, especially like the Warhol party did
Yeah,
a very
that
good
was a
job
scene.
of.
That was more style, though, I would say. But either way,
Yeah, but like the
interactions,
dialogue interactions there worked for me.
sure.
I think it all worked. Again, it's very believable, but it's also this movie moved along for me. I love the entire thing, and like the dialogue was part of that. That it just
Right.
I kind of rolled with it.
That's fair.
I do want to mention something else briefly. Like, I don't know if this is the case, but it felt like Ratzo's dialogue was a lot stronger than Joe's.
But I think that was meant to be.
Yeah, because he's more.
I don't know if I feel like
worldly,
that
I
because
think.
I appreciated Dustin Hoffman's acting more than John Voight's, or if I thought that I'm supposed to appreciate the dialogue more because he's supposed to be smarter.
Yeah, I think that is the latter. I think is what I got out of
But
it.
here's the thing: I don't know if the dialogue was actually better. Like, I'm thinking back on it, and I don't know if he said all that much smart stuff. I think the entire reason that I
But
thought
I
he was
think-
smarter is because he called Joe dumb.
Yeah, but I think that's also the part. Neither of them are all that intellectual,
Right.
And I think I got from a number of the women, especially that. I think what really pointed out is the woman he brings back from the Warholian party
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
is way more intelligent to the point
Oh, yeah.
of it becomes very obvious that Joe Buck has no idea about anything really.
Yeah.
Well, they play a word game together, and he has no
Embedded.
clue what the hell he's doing.
He also can't spell money correctly. And
Yeah.
so, anyways, but
MONY.
yeah,
That's how you
sure.
spell it.
That's correct. Though. I think like because Ratso is basically the street smart character, so that comes across. But he's not going to be the CEO of any company anytime soon.
Right.
Or he might be.
Well, like,
I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. I don't know.
Because of Joe Buck's naivety, I think that also comes across. But it's again perfectly believable. So that's all I can say about that.
Okay.
I don't know.
So I'm
I
giving it
haven't,
one.
I haven't given a score yet
Right.
for this. I am going to give it a 1, but it's a softer one.
Fair enough.
All right.
That's about what I said.
So I'm going to discuss style here, and which I absolutely adored.
Mm-hmm.
One of the hilarious little recurring jokes in here is that when a sex scene happens, it'll often cut to like the television or to kind of flash or fantasy flashback type things, which are actually very funny at times.
Yeah.
There's one where he's in the movie theater and he's watching a space thing and you see the rocket like go off and then like
Breaks in half.
Yeah, breaks in half. They had a lot of good moments like that, and also it's a very weird movie in the sense that there's a continuous narrative and then they'll cut for all these kind of weird montages, which will either be the drug-fueled Warholian party or the kind of
Nightmarish
memories, or the fantasies of Ratso that really kept me entertained throughout this entire film. So that's all I'm going to say about style. I guess you want to do soundtrack, Steve? Or
Yeah, I mean, I can briefly talk about the soundtrack. There's the one song, and I'm blanking on the name right now, but there's the one song that they keep replaying throughout.
It's sort of Joe Buck's theme song, kind of. I would say.
I mean, it's it's the leitmotif throughout the movie, which is I like I said, I thought it was going to get old, but it never really did. The music in general was pretty damn good. I don't remember like what songs were played. I don't remember if there's anything that I recognized.
Don't know like pop culture recognizable ones, at least that I could think of either.
But overall, like the sound design was good, kept me into it. It wasn't like mind-blowingly good, but definitely one worthy. And as far as the rest of the style, it was pretty great. As Ian, I think you covered most of it. I really liked the cinematography, how everything was shot, continuously interesting shots and design of how the shots were taken.
No, I agree with both of that, and also like I just want to mention, not that I think this is a mark against it, but it's, to me, because of the time it was made, you could see like the montages were sort of like the thing from Easy Rider. Like they're just like, to me, I would describe them as like, in quotes, standard 60s drug montage. But that's fine. It was handled very well. Just that it's sort of like an artifact at the time at this point. But nevertheless, like you guys said, everything else about it had its own little, it was all put together very well. It, in fact, made sense of the movie and enhanced the movie at certain points. So, yeah. And
also, I just want to, one last point, costume design was great in this movie.
Yeah, yes, it was.
Especially the slow deterioration of certain, like Joe Buck comes in with a whole suitcase full of clothes, and then he loses all his clothes when he gets kicked out of his apartment or his hotel room. So he's wearing basically one shirt or two shirts throughout this entire movie, and the same jacket. And you see how he has to keep it clean. Ratso has these very 60s suits. And I don't know, throughout it was very clever and really tells you about all the characters. I think all of the costume design in this was fantastic.
Yeah, you're right. I agree with all that. It all came together, and I'll also give it a 1 if I haven't said that just before.
Yep, I will give it a 1 as well. You're absolutely right about costume design. And
1, it's a very stylish movie. So the final is Steve-O on recommendation.
I am going to say that if you want to be depressed after watching a movie, check this one out. It's not a feel-good movie. Don't watch it at a party or anything like that. But
or do.
I like this was a terrific movie. Really makes you kind of consider your life a little bit, and if you have it a lot better than these two guys did, then yes.
So have you decided to give up male gigoloing?
I just can't do it at this point. At this point in my life,
all right,
I can't do it.
Well, I mean, I agree. Like, I'm always sort of vaguely depressed anyway, and so a movie that tells me, yeah, life is depressing. Thanks, movie. I knew that, but it was still a well done story. So, I mean, yeah, I would recommend it to, again, people who can appreciate this kind of story and won't be turned off by it not being like the happiest, sunniest message in the world. But because of what we said, everything about it all came together excellently in all other aspects. Then yeah, I mean, of course, it's number 43 on the list, so it's a classic. So check it out if you haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Scott made a reference earlier to Requiem for a Dream. Requiem for a Dream was a movie made to depress the hell out of you and stop you from taking drugs. So this one is not intending to make you stop being a male prostitute.
Don't be a male gigolo.
Go on, though. But what it really did was give a very real view of what that kind of what the dirtiness of New York is like. And yeah, at times it's depressing, but I don't think it's crafted to be merely depressing.
You're right. I think that's
which is what Requiem did.
Yeah, sure.
This one, I was not as depressed at the end of this movie as I was in the middle of the movie. And yeah, so it has a down
despite
ending.
The fact that it ends on the death of a main character.
Yeah, I saw it coming.
And
we're all waiting for Dustin Hoffman to die anyway. But it was a very moving work, and it's worthwhile to see. It's not as terrible as I think Requiem for the Dream was, but it is it's impactful where it needs to be.
Is that a 1? I'm giving it a 1, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that. So
1 across the board. So this is going to be an easy one to sum up. We all give it 9s.
I think
that's perfectly fine. Yeah.
Which I think it for the exact same reason supporting characters too. Yeah. So this is a 9 overall, which is it's a damn good movie. Check it out. And I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, here with Stephen Ramosi.
Have a good night.
And Scott Thurlow.
Hey, I'm podcasting here. Good night.
We hope you've enjoyed your stay.
MOTSterpiece Theatre.
Join us again next time, won't you?
MOTSterpiece Theatre.
Music and editing by Chris Morgan.
MOTSterpiece Theatre.
This has been a Lost Cinemas production. All rights reserved.